So this is a Q&A about how to homeschool high school and all of the kinds of questions I've gotten over the years. I've also done question boxes over on Instagram. I get lots of DMs, comments, people asking all the time about how to do it and all these various questions. I'm going to say that I'm glad that we all have like a common experience because the questions are usually pretty similar. So I'm finally going to do my best to answer them, put them on YouTube for anybody who wants this knowledge. I know that it is probably going to be a small audience, but I also want to be able to encourage the few moms who do attempt to homeschool high school because it was one of the most rewarding things I've ever done in my life. And so if you are also a veteran homeschool mom who has graduated out children yourself, then I encourage you to leave a comment and share some of the things you did, the curriculum you use, what your kids are doing, because I want to be able to encourage mothers who want to do it but are uncertain. And so before I start answering the questions, first and foremost, the one thing you are going to hear me say over and over again is, what are your goals? You have to at least know what you are aiming for, because your child becoming an entrepreneur versus trying to get into a top school, those are different paths, and it's going to require different types of decisions and work. And so the goal can change, that's completely fine, but you at least have to know what direction you are going in. You cannot be preparing for the trades and doing everything as if you're going to go into the trades and then senior year decide you're going to apply to MIT. And yes, I have seen that happen before. And you haven't taken any science classes. That's not going to be an easy pivot. I'm not going to say it can't be done, because anything can be done, but you at least have to know where you're headed. And this decision, I think, should be made like junior high. That is because, as you know, my own personal goals was to get my kids into college, not just any college, but a top college, to get them into a top school and maybe get them some scholarship money if I could manage it, which I managed to do. And those things take planning. So what are your goals? Kind of have that in mind and keep that in mind, and that's going to affect the answer to a lot of these questions. So the first question, what qualifies you as a parent to homeschool? Well, you answered your own question right there. I'm a parent. Does homeschooling affect your chances of getting into college? Not at all. If anything, I think it's an advantage. You have to remember that the college application itself, it's a marketing tool. You are marketing the student, whether, for me, because as a homeschool mom, I had a lot more say in that application because I had to do the counselor letter. They even wanted a short essay, like a paper on why I decided homeschool and things like that. I had to prepare all of that. You have to remember that the application, you have to have, the kid has to have done the work, but the application is a marketing tool. And so I did not get any pushback. I did not sense any reluctance or any difficulty whatsoever from any college that we applied to. And as you know, my kids got into University of Pennsylvania, University of Virginia, Villanova, Penn State, Maine, Drexel, Temple, which they got full scholarships, and just other schools I don't even remember. But what I am saying is there is absolutely no disadvantage whatsoever of getting into college if you were home educated. All right. How do you teach subject matter as it becomes more difficult, a topic you don't know well yourself? And how did you overcome your own gaps? Okay, so one, you have to remember that everybody has gaps. People seem to think that there's somebody out there getting some kind of education that covers everything. It does not. Every single education, even the most expensive private school education, I can guarantee you has gaps. And I have even looked at some of the curriculum. If I can get my hands on it, I've looked at it, and there are gaps. I know that I went through public school. I have gaps. My husband went through private Catholic school. He has gaps. Everybody has gaps. And that was something that I think I was paranoid about myself, only to realize as I got older, everybody has gaps. We have lots of doctor friends and lawyer friends, and we talk, there are things that they don't know, and that's okay, because are you willing to learn? So everybody has gaps. So what I suggest is you use well-established curriculum. So that's what I decided to do. I decided to stick with larger companies, well-established curriculum, ones that have been around for a long time, because they can work out the issues within their curriculum year after year. If you go with some newfangled new curriculum that pops up, you're taking a risk there, in my opinion, if you don't know what you are doing. So focus on well-established curriculum, and this is especially true for math, and you focus on the 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic. Always focus on that. Like, I cannot just emphasize that enough. And so about teaching subject matter as it becomes more difficult, a topic you don't know well yourself, as the kids get older, this is the thing. The textbooks and the curriculum out there is so fantastic. And when they are young, you begin to teach them how to learn through the books. And I learned through the books. I learned so much while reading the books along with my kids. Like when you look at the math curriculum, all the directions are there. So that's why reading is so important. You focus on reading with your child, and then they begin to comprehend. And when they can do that, they can also then be self-learners. And if it is a topic that you do not know well yourself, like so for me, you make sure you have a tutor, a backup tutor. So let's take math, for example. As you guys know, I struggled a lot with math. Yes, I went through public school, and my math education was horrible. And so with that, then I was very paranoid about gaps, and because I really didn't know what I was doing, like what's in an excellent math education. So when I used to try all of these like fancy, I call it like high-tech type of curriculum, like Singapore math, for example, it was so confusing, I couldn't do it. I'm not saying there are not other people out there who have not had success. I know that they have, but I couldn't do it because I was always scared. Like, in order to implement that type of curriculum, I think you kind of have to know what's missing, and if you don't know what's going to be missing, then you struggle. So we use Saxon and Horizons for the younger years, and that's what I recommend. You can go look at my curriculum video where I go into this more. And then upper years was Chalk Dust Math. And so my kids followed that curriculum. It was an excellent education, but as they got older, and if they were going to have questions, I had a tutor on standby. So they would do their work and I could grade it. The teacher's guides were excellent. I would grade it. And if they had questions about certain things, I had a tutor on standby and we would immediately see her. She would explain it and she was fantastic. And it was just on an as needed basis. She was an excellent tutor. She loved working with us because my kids were good students, but also because we could see her during the day when the majority of her students were from public school and she would have to see them after school hours. So she always made time for my kids. And I think it would be even better now because we didn't have Zoom back then. If we had Zoom back then, I mean, that would have been fantastic, just to be able to log on with her and then get the questions answered and then move on. But that's what you do, is you have backup help. And by the time they're older, like they just move through things so easily that that's what you want for your kids, especially because as they head to college, they're not going to have great teachers. They're going to have adjuncts. And I'm not saying they're all bad, but you know that they struggle. I mean, they had teacher's assistants, grad students, and all these kind of professors. And a lot of them don't teach well, or they don't want to teach. They have no teaching experience sometimes. And so your kid has to learn. They have to learn how to teach themselves. What did you use for SAT prep? How do you do that? At what age did you start practicing? Should students take the PSAT for scholarships? So what I did was I went on Amazon. I thought about getting like a tutor, and I did hire someone to work with my daughter, a young woman at church. She was wonderful. I did hire her to start working on the PSATs with my daughter. My daughter, who's the oldest, and she had a few sessions with her just to like kind of get in the groove of it. And then after that, we did everything on our own. And why? Because I wanted to implement it as almost like a subject. I had my kids work on it every week. We started in 9th grade, maybe even earlier because of PSATs, but you start early. I picked the 4 or 5 like best guides off of Amazon, and they are so inexpensive. I just bought a bunch of guides, all different kinds, the standard like Kaplan's and Barron's, but also all these newfangled ones that would come out. And I bought all of them, and I had them go through these books like an extra subject. Not every day, but definitely every week they just had to work through these books on their own, which my kids did. And then I also bought some online practice exams. I found them online somewhere. They were online practice. And that one, I did that just to kind of get them used to another exam, to get them used to the timing. And then I would wake them up Saturday mornings at 8 to mimic that time frame. So they had to prepare for that to make sure they were fresh in their, their brains were fresh and ready for that. So I just found some online practice exams. And you have to check with the school. Now, I know that things have changed so much, but back then, with some schools, there were limits how many times you could take SATs. Be aware of where you are aiming for and what schools you're applying for, and see if the school has limits. If the school does not, then go for it. Just pay for it and take as many exams as your kid can. I knew a kid who took 10, okay? And that is because they were applying for a scholarship that super scored their SATs. So all this kid did was focus on the verbal side, and they got the score they wanted. Then they focused on the math side, and then they got the score, and then they super scored it, and they got that scholarship. I started practicing, like getting them to practice standardized testing with the Iowas every single year. I have in my notes here 4th grade. Okay, so starting 4th grade, but I think my daughter was like 3rd grade. And why I did that was, one, to make my husband realize that we were doing a lot of work. He really appreciated that, the standardized testing at the end of the year. State law will also determine standardized testing. Like in Pennsylvania, back then, it was like 4th, 7th, and 11th grade or something like that. Like there were 3 different years where you had to submit scores. I only submitted according to what was legally required, but personally, I did standardized testing every single year to get my kids accustomed to the testing environment, to get them used to taking that test with kids talking and, goofing off and all that kind of stuff. There was always like somebody who would be offering standardized testing for homeschoolers, and I took advantage of it. So even if they didn't do well, which my kids were fine, but at the same time, even if they didn't do well, I would rather have them not do well there and us figure out why they were not doing well. Like early on with my oldest, the first time she took standardized tests, I would look in, because she was 8 years old. I would look in the classroom and I saw that at the end, she would just be reading her book. And when she was finished, I would ask her hey, hon, what were you doing? And how come you were reading your book? And she said, I was done and I just want to read my book. And that's totally fine at that age. But as you get older, I had to teach her as she got older, I had to teach her how to recheck her work, how to go back and make sure things were ready for that. So it's little things like that that I think are good preparation for the SATs. And should they take the PSATs for scholarships? If you think your kid can do it, and you have to check the cutoff lines, the cutoff scores for your state, because they do vary by state. It's going to be very difficult to get National Merit Scholar. That is for sure. But if you think your kid can do it, it doesn't hurt anything to try. And I did know a kid I've known 2 kids who made National Merit Scholar, which is the top level, and they got some really nice scholarships. But also know that scholarship requirements change year to year. The school that they went to for that full scholarship, it was full tuition, room, and board. Is that not crazy? The school doesn't offer it anymore. And so you have to determine if it's worth it. That's why, again, I said you have to know your goals. Where are you aiming for? Because then you can do your research and you can lay out a plan. How do you prepare for college essays? You need to practice early. And there are lots of guides out there. But the one thing you have to remember about college essays, especially if you are applying to a competitive school, is that the essay is a way to market yourself without sounding delusional or arrogant. It just is. It is supposed to give the admission counselor just a glimpse into your soul, who you are as a person. And so it is a very different kind of essay. If you can do it and you think it's a great essay, go for it. But if you are not sure and you are applying and your child is applying to a competitive school, I would suggest you just hire somebody. Someone good to help them with that. Timeline for the major stuff if the student is college bound. Are there any certain classes high schoolers have to take during the high school years? Absolutely. And again, it's going to depend. When you say like timeline for the major stuff, it's going to depend what school your child is applying to. Because some schools have very rigid deadlines and requirements, and other schools are like rolling admission. And are there any certain classes of high schools? Again, it's going to depend upon what school you are applying to. So for example, as you know, I was aiming for the Ivy League. And so when you look at the Ivy League requirements, now they say like these are suggested classes. And what that means is, are you taking the classes that are challenging you according to the resources that are available to you? Okay. And so if, because for us, we live in the suburbs of Philadelphia in a nice area, they are going to be comparing my child's transcript to the public schoolers in this area. And those kids all take AP classes and things like that. And then when I did more research, I found that the Ivies, or at least the Ivy that we were aiming for, they did not accept any credits from any outside schools. So that meant that like community college classes and things like that, the credits were not going to transfer over. Plus, after doing some more digging, yes, they wanted to see AP classes. And so that's what I went with. So if I know that senior year, I want them to have complete APs. So let's talk about like math. By senior year, if you are applying to an Ivy League, it should be Calculus AB or Calculus BC. So then what does that mean for junior year? You need to take pre-calc. And then what does that mean? And so like algebra 2, geometry. So you have to lay that out. That means that they're going to be taking algebra 1 like 6th, 7th grade, all right, in order to make that deadline. So this is why you have to know what you're aiming for. And what school. Other schools are not that rigorous. They're just not. Like when they applied to Temple gave credit not only for AP, but for any like community college or any other classes you took outside. And so my one son, he entered as 3 credits shy of a junior because he had so many credits. And the other one was like 6 credits shy of a junior. It was crazy how many credits that Temple awarded. So you're going to have to figure out where you're going to go. How do you do a transcript? How do you give grades in high school? So how I give grades, and people are like, oh, they're like mommy grades, like you're the one giving them grades. And I get that. And there is truth to that, which is why as a homeschooler, you have to back everything up with standardized tests. Yes, my kids got a lot of A's, but back then with their AP scores, and also the College Board had SAT 2. They offered these exams called SAT 2, and the last I checked, they don't do that anymore. And my kids took an SAT 2 class. For every single class they did not have an AP score for. And so if they scored so high, like 750 or up, I mean, that's an A, right? So I use that almost like the final exam kind of thing. And when you give your child an A in algebra, but they also got like 780 on the math in SAT 2 or on the SATs, like they're not going to question that A. So that is what you need to do. So with grading, personally, when I would grade my kids' work, I would actually grade. If they got, 3 wrong, then that would be a 98. What is that? And I had a grading scale and all of that ready. So that's how I went about it. I would give them grades. But ultimately, too, is that final grade mattered. And that final grade would be a standardized test. Again, a lot of this is going to be determined by where you want to go to school and what that's going to look like. And then the transcript, like how do you do a transcript? Back then, there was a website where you only had to pay $5 a month, and you could like turn off your subscription and turn it back on every time you need it. And so I kept an active account for a couple of years. But I can't find it. It must be closed. But you could just plug in your grades, and it would calculate it for you and just spit it out. So it was very simple. And you, as the parent, you are the one who certifies and validates that transcript. That's it. But that's why, again, I urge you to back it up with outside measures. such as, like, if you're okay with the community college because that's what you're going to do, and then you're going to go to state school, which is an awesome option, then have your kid take community college classes. Have that as proof of what you've done. And so with that transcript, you validate it, you certify it, and it's done. You can find lots of examples of transcripts online. And like I said, I couldn't find that website I used, but I'm sure you could even do it on ChatGPT these days. Okay, so try AI to put it together. How do you make them competitive for the college application process? You have to do research on the schools that you are aiming for. Look at the top students and see what it is that they have, and then reverse engineer all of that. Okay, that's just it. Like, when you say competitive for the college application process, it's a well-written, awesome essay. It is having very highly challenging and competitive classes, having great scores. They want to see all these things. And then, of course, references. You have to have references. For my kids, I did have like teachers lined up. Like, I was planning on this. And so their Latin teacher wrote them references because if you've watched my other video, I had them, I hired a tutor for their foreign language. She was fantastic. And she wrote each of them a recommendation. Like, in high school, your kids should be in activities and should be doing things where they are comfortable asking someone for a recommendation. You have to prepare for that. And so you make them competitive by making the very best application you can. And you have to be sharp on that application. I'm going to talk more about that later. What advice do you have about co-ops? I've talked about this before, and you have to, again, know your goals. And because my goals were for a top school, co-ops were just for fun. The one thing I've realized about co-ops, you know how, like, I'm saying, like, you have to know your goals? If your goals are not that teacher's goals, the classes are just for fun. Like, they're not going to satisfy anything. And so we were always a part of a co-op, sometimes two co-ops at the same time, because my kids liked, you know, their friends, and they wanted to meet these friends and that friends, and with sports and all of that kind of stuff. And I loved our co-ops. I love the support, the friendships. We still keep in touch with a lot of those people still to this day. But do not rely on them for academic excellence. That's just my opinion, okay? If you do, if let's say there is a mom who used to be a biology teacher, because I've seen this in co-ops, and so she's going to run the biology lab for her class, that's great. But you need to go get the curriculum, see what they're going to do, and see if it matches up with what it is you need in your homeschool. Okay, but with co-ops, what I did use that for, that I would put on transcripts, is all of the extracurriculars. There was always sports or art or things like that that they were great for, and public speaking is another great subject that co-ops can provide. Does a parent need to be home, or can you do all this online? I would think a parent needs to be home. I don't know how a parent wouldn't be home, because I found homeschooling to be all-consuming. And can you do this all online? Well, you guys know how I feel about computers. As they get older, like with the AP classes, it was online, but even that, I managed to control that and to minimize it, because I would cut out work accordingly, or I would just tell the kids to do it differently so that they were not on computers all the time. I don't like that. Like, I did not want that for my kids. How many AP classes do you recommend? Oh, and the whole thing about, does a parent need to be home? Yes, a parent needs to be home. I don't think it is fair for a child to be homeschooled and not have the parent at home giving all their attention and time to it. It's a lot of work, and a kid needs guidance. And on top of that, they should not have to struggle. One of my roles was to make it as seamless and as frictionless as possible for my kids to get their schoolwork done. So I always had meals out for them to just go eat, relax, and then go back to work. If anything, if their computer needed, something happened, like if their computer shut down, I fixed it as fast as I could for them, or I'd have their dad fix it as fast as they could. Like, I did everything I could to make it easier on them. All the school supplies were ready. We went to all activities. I organized all of that stuff because I think that's what I owe them. That's their right to an education. I owe that to my children if I decide to keep them at home. and I was at their beck and call for rides. So yes, you need to be home. They had activities every single day, or a friend over, or going out with friends every single day. And until they can drive, like, you have to be home. So yes. How many AP classes do you recommend and why? As many as the kid can take. Now, again, this is upon your goals. If your goal is not a top school, you can probably maybe get away with a couple. Or if you want to get college credits out of the way, like I said, a lot of schools will give you college credit for AP classes, but you have to do the research and see what the school will do. And but if you're applying to a highly competitive school, what about the other students? They're all going to have a ton of APs. They've probably been taking APs since freshman year. Now, I don't think that's necessary. I think all APs like during junior and senior year is great, but you have to know who you're competing against. That is going to decide how much you take. What are your thoughts on dual enrollment? Dual enrollment, I think, is great. But again, look at the school you are aiming for and see if they will accept the credits, because they may not. And then what was it for? Or like for us, what I discovered back then, I don't know if it's changed, when we were trying to apply to an Ivy League school, they actually did, somebody did tell me this from the school themselves. They preferred to see AP over community college classes for a freshman applicant. That's what they said. To them, it just wasn't the same thing. And so since that's what I was aiming for, dual enrollment was kind of out for us. On top of that, back then, there were no online classes like that. So my kid would have to have gone to the community college, which I didn't want them to because they were too young. And I didn't want them around, like at 14, 15, I didn't want them hanging around with 18, 19, 20-year-old kids. I just didn't. I have other reasons for that, but that's not what I wanted. And so AP it was. So that's what we did. But again, when you're talking dual enrollment, know why you are doing it and what you need it for, and if the school that you end up at, like for your bachelor's, is going to accept it. Did you teach a second language? Because again, my goal was a top school and it was a college. Yes, they did take a second language. You have to take a foreign language. 4 years is optimal, if not even more. And so my kids took 6 years of Latin. And all of them, they took the National Latin exam every single year. They took the SAT 2 in Latin, and I think they took AP Latin. I can't remember now. How did you get them? And so with the second language, did I teach it? No. I decided very early on, because there were so many programs available. And like a lot of homeschoolers were like, oh, Rosetta Stone is great. And I just said, you know what, like, I'm not even going to attempt this. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, there's only so much I can do. On top of that, let's say that we went with Spanish or French, which was like the most common foreign language. I was not even going to try that. And I did take Spanish in school. Like, why, what, like, even just the way you pronounce words is going to be off. And I did not care, even if they could hear it on a video or anything like that. I was like, they just need a person to be able to guide them through that. And that is also because I'm Korean. And when I try to teach non-Korean people like a Korean word and they have trouble pronouncing certain things, like sometimes you have to kind of even help them move their mouth and things like that. And I don't see how you could do that in a video. And because the foreign language requirement for colleges was so important, and you really don't have time for a do-over, I was just not going to mess with it. So, but I ended up finding a fantastic Latin tutor. I chose Latin for my kids, a fantastic Latin tutor, and we stayed with her for 6 years, and she got my kids through the top levels of it. And why I chose Latin was because of the Romance languages, and also because 60% of the English language has Latin roots. And then like if they wanted to go into medicine, I figured that it would be easier for them to learn a lot of medical terms if they took Latin. And sure enough, when my daughter was in college, she did thank me for putting her through Latin classes, because she said it was so helpful with memorizing all of the body parts and things like that. So that's why I chose Latin. How did you get them experience in biology and chemistry labs? So back then, organization doesn't exist anymore. There was like a group, like an organization that went around and they did all of the labs for biology, chemistry, and physics, like all of them in during a camp. And they had the lab reports done and everything. It was phenomenal. The kids would see their friends. It was so much fun for them. And every single lab that was required by, again, a standardized curriculum, this organization did that. And so my kids did all of the labs that way. Now, what was my backup was I had called Villanova and Eastern and a couple of other schools around here, and I had undergraduate students that I could call to ask them if they could do those labs with my kids, and I would have paid them. We also had a professor, a retired professor, who did labs at one of the co-ops. You see, like sometimes that's what that's the benefit of co-ops. And if you are a parent and you can't find anything like that, what it then is, if you are part of a co-op, I would suggest that you band together and try to hire someone to organize that for you. But you can do it. It was not you, but I would say if you want to outsource that, you can definitely do that. There are a lot of ways to do it. How do you graduate a student from homeschooling? How do you acquire the high school diploma when the time came? So the high school diploma is just that piece of paper where I would have written out all their classes, their transcript, and all that information. I signed it, and that was their diploma. And I have had literally no problem. My kids have had no questions. It just works. Like colleges, they gave me no pushback whatsoever. And that is the high school diploma. Now, if they were like going into the military but even the military, I knew homeschoolers who did that. There were no problems. Trade schools, like I have never seen a problem. The only time was when a parent did not keep good records, because that's the other thing too, is that you do have to keep very good records. So how do you graduate a student from homeschooling? You finish the work and you declare them graduated. Now, I know that sounds flippant, but you have to remember that I did the work and my kids completed it all. They had an excellent education and I'm very, very happy for them. So you do that. But you can't have held your kids back and not done the work and be like, oh, you graduated. What are your goals? What were your goals for high school? Did you accomplish those goals? Do they meet the state requirements? And can your kid take this high school homeschool diploma you've given them and be able to move on to whatever it is that they want to do? Do you recommend them getting a GED? No, because my kids didn't need it. And I know that there's like, a feeling, a stigma about GED being like symbolizing that they dropped out or like they didn't have adequate work. I mean, if I had needed it, I don't think I would have a problem with it. But for me, I did the work, and so I gave them a diploma, and they have had no questions. There was even one time when my daughter applied for like a job or an internship. It wasn't a job, and they wanted a copy of her high school diploma. And so I just printed something out online. It said like, I declare that this is the high school diploma of my daughter's name. I signed it and it was accepted. That was it. How did the college application process work? Exactly the same as for anybody else. Back then it was the Common App. I think there might be even other things now too, but you open up a Common App account and you just fill it all out and you upload all your documents, whatever it is that they require. The only thing I will say too is that like back then as a homeschooler, I had to like write up a counselor letter. They wanted obviously their transcript, but also like a resume and all of these and a little bit extra stuff. They wanted like a statement asking why I decided to homeschool. I remember that because I wrote it. And the one tip I am going to give you is that keep it short, keep it sweet, and keep it efficient. Okay, this is not like a journal entry, and they are not interested in your life story, and they do not want a window into your soul. Okay, like keep it short, keep it efficient, and just give them the information that they're asking for. Any information or tips on obtaining scholarships? There's all different kinds of scholarships out there. You have to do your research. The kind of scholarships I found were school-based, like the school offered the scholarship, and that would be based on something like a GPA, SAT score, things like that, and that is what I suggest you do too. I remember when my sons were applying to college, I found that Ohio State at the time, if you had, even if you were out of state, if you had a certain level of a SAT score, it was like a full tuition scholarship. So when you are looking for these things, you have to do your research because the requirements of these scholarships also change every single year. So I could tell you like, oh yeah, if you get a 1500 on the SAT, then you get a full scholarship. But that number could change. And I've seen it change over the years for different schools. So when you talk about like obtaining scholarships, just be prepared to do some research, several hours, and start Googling and start researching and looking into it, and then find the information and figure out what you have to do to get it, and then do what you have to do to get it. How did you handle proms, sports, and extracurriculars? So with extracurriculars, I wrote up like a wish list, like a dream list of all the things that I wanted my kids to try. They also had things that they wanted to try, and I wrote it out, and I actually like went through all of it. Like I had choir on there. Like I wanted my kids to do choir because I loved choir growing up, and my kids did like singing. So we found a homeschool choir. She was a phenomenal choir director. So we had to drive to Delaware. It was like a 45-minute ride one way, but well worth it. She did so much with the kids, and my kids learned so much. So choir, I wanted them to take gymnastics. We did that. They took pottery. They took chess lessons. Like all of the things that you want your kids to try and learn and experience, write out a list and then start checking them off. That's how I did it, so that it wouldn't be out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. And I am so glad I did. Even down to like them taking driver's ed classes senior year, like I had that on my list. And then also, of course, like your kids are going to say like, can I try this? Like my one kid wanted to try DJing, and all he wanted was the equipment. And so I bought it for him, and he tried to be a DJ. Like things like that, that's what I did. And if they, like with chess, they got lessons, which they enjoyed. She was a wonderful chess tutor. Then what I would do is I looked around for like chess tournaments, and I had my kids experience that too. Pottery classes. There is the community center around here, and they offer pottery classes. My kids took like 2 or 3 of that. I wanted my kids to have voice lessons. I found a voice teacher and a phenomenal voice teacher, and they took voice lessons. And I did that not only for their singing, but also just to learn how to carry their voice, and for public speaking things. All of those kind of things. Write out what it is that you want, what it is they want, and just figure out how you're going to get there. Sports, community sports. We have homeschool volleyball. That was a big thing, and my kids just took to it. They loved volleyball. By junior, senior year with my sons, I just started my own homeschool volleyball team, and then we went to all the competitions. And honestly, I wish I had done that sooner, because then I was able to meet their needs. Like we, did a lot more competitions and had a lot more practice, and just they enjoyed it a lot. I enjoyed it a lot. Was it costly? Yeah, but it was worth it. So with sports, also in Pennsylvania, and I'm pretty sure it is true for all the other states, which is that if your kid, like as long as they're registered in the state as a homeschooler or whatever, like in Pennsylvania, as long as I follow all of the requirements, which was just submitting my affidavit at the beginning of the year and things like that, they can participate in the public school sports. I know that that's what Tim Tebow did. He played football. I think it's like even his mom was the one who pushed for that legislation. But if you just check with your public school if that's what you want, and they can play on the sport teams. I didn't really want that because, again, I didn't want anything to do with the public school system and with their schedules and stuff like that. So I tried to stay within like community sports and things. Proms, and then my kids did play travel volleyball, but that was just not for us. Okay, it was just so consuming and all of that kind of stuff. How did you handle proms? There are a few moms every year here in this area who hold a prom. They rent out a country club, they decorate, they have door prizes, and my kids went to that and they enjoyed it and it was fun for them. If you don't have anything like that, then I would suggest you organize it. How do you motivate high schoolers that don't want to think about college? Conversations about their future, that needs to happen early. And I'm talking like middle school. What are you expecting from them as a parent? What do they think? And so when you say like, how do you motivate high schoolers that don't want to think about college? Is it because they don't want to go? Then is it clear that they need to start working after high school? Like, what are your goals for them? Is it that you just want them to earn money? Are you planning on telling them they need to live on their own? Like, just kind of step back and think about and plan out what you are expecting from them and what they think is expected from them and what it is that they want. And that's important to have those conversations early on. Like college, my kids were going to college. One way or another, they were going to go to school. I wanted them to have that bachelor's degree and then to do whatever, because then it's easier to pivot, right? I mean, like, even if they had their bachelor's degree and then they wanted to work at Starbucks, that's great. And in fact, one of my kids did work at a coffee shop, and that's great. You can do that. And then you can go back to corporate America if you want. But it's harder the other way around. Like if you are a barista and then you decide you want to work in corporate America and you got to go back to college, like that is a huge time suck and that is a huge transition. And so college for me was an absolute given. And that was communicated to my kids since they were little. Like it was not an option. And if they were like so against it, then I would have worked with them so that we could have finished, 2 years of their bachelor, like in dual enrollment type of thing, finished 2 years when they were in high school, and then have only 2 years left like of college to finish up, and then they'd be done. Like I could have sped up and accelerated their education so they could have been finished sooner. So talk to your kids, have some goals, have some expectations set out, and have conversations around that. For high schoolers, should they sleep in and start later or up early and hitting the books? That's going to depend upon your schedule. I liked my kids to sleep. So as long as they went to bed at a reasonable time, I usually let them sleep, and they would sleep until like 9 or 10, which is still a lot for high school, right? And I think it's healthy for the kids. It's better for their brain growth and their physical development, and they grow tall, which my kids did. So I always say sleep as much as you can, but it should not interfere with school. I have seen kids where if they are just doing their own thing and they're not paying attention or they're not listening to their parent, if you can't control that, like that is an issue, because they can't sleep until 1 and then think that they can get their work done and still have activities. It was required that they have their work done so we can go to our activities. So that meant you had to get up at a certain time. But if they had the option, like the day, like if their activities were later and they could manage to get their work done, I think they should sleep if they need it, as long as they went to bed on time, not because they went to bed at 5 a.m. So up early and hitting the books, like, there's no point in getting up if you can't function or you can't focus. So make sure they get enough sleep, work out a schedule with them, know what your expectations are, like where you need to be in certain subjects by that week, and they should be able to get it done. Should kids start college early? Academically, I think it suits many kids, but you have to think about the age of the peers that they are going to be around. And you also have to understand that we are made of all different parts. Like there are all different aspects of our personality and us as human beings that all mature at different rates. And so even if academically they are advanced, socially, emotionally, they may not be advanced. They could even be behind. And you have to keep that in mind when you think about kids starting college early. Because like I had said before about like putting my kids in community college, I did not want them at like 14, 15 to be hanging around with people who were all legal adults. That's just the truth. That's how I felt. And I just did not think that was an appropriate environment for my kids. I know it's different for some kids and they do well, but that's just not a struggle I wanted. So that's why it is going to depend upon how you feel about the particular unique situation you're in and the child you have and what kind of options you have available. So in closing this, I just want you to remember something, okay? Your kids are special to you. My kids are special to me. but they are not special to anyone else, and that's okay. All right, they are not special to anyone else. So you have to make sure that they are going to work just as hard as anyone else, if not even harder. And you have to make sure that they have all the credentials and all the education that they need to reach their goals. Because I remember there was this older homeschool mom that, would give a lot of counsel when we were younger. And one of the things, like when I remember asking her specifically about SAT testing, about standardized tests, and she said, homeschoolers don't need it. Homeschoolers do not need it because your kid is so special and you've got such a unique portfolio. Well, that proved to be wrong, especially for her kids. Okay, nobody cares about a portfolio of your child, unless like they're going to go into art or something. That's not what I'm talking about. When you're homeschooled, they do not want to see a portfolio of your writing and your curriculum and like essays and like their math tests. Like, no, nobody wants to see that. What they want is scores. And her kid did not do well at all, and it closed a lot of doors. Like there were schools that wouldn't even look at him. She was hoping that, I guess, the portfolio would be enough to open the door, but that door is opened by standardized scores. Like, do they have that? And then they're like, oh, well, let me see what else you can do, that kind of thing. So just remember that your kid is special to you, but to no one else. And in the end, you do your child a disservice if you do not make them competitive for whatever field or whatever it is that they want to do. If you choose to homeschool high school, you are taking on a big responsibility, like an awesome responsibility. It is a lot of work. The rewards are bountiful if you can finish it. It was so worth it, but in the end, you have to do a good job, and you owe that to your child. So I wish you the very best. If you have any other questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll see if I can answer them in a comment. And if anybody else, like I said, has managed to graduate their children out homeschooling them, then I ask you to share in the comments so that you can encourage the younger moms.